Good afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you're watching the Muddy Waters podcast. Muddy's water. If I can muddy the water with saying muddy water, have fun with that. So, anyway, this is Chuck Ellis, again, host of the Muddy Waters podcast. We exist to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in our state. One of the biggest gaps is between people on the ground who are trying to pay attention to what's going on in the political scene, being able to actually hear what's happening in Augusta and other places around the state, because the mainstream media is not doing their part. They're not helping, doing enough to actually report on what's actually going on. They actually have become a propaganda arm of the Democrats. You all know that. I say that every time. But that's why we exist. We try to bring on people who are actually at work in Augusta, and people from around the state, business owners and moms, parents, and whatever, just whoever we can who have information on what's actually really happening. So today we are fortunate to have with us the House Minority Leader, Representative Billy Bob Faulkingham. Thanks for coming on, Billy Bob.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chuck. Sorry it took so long to get this scheduled to work out.
That's all right. Word has it that you guys are pretty busy, dealing with all the fun shenanigans down in Augusta. So it's understandable. Yeah, and then on top of that, you don't live near Augusta, right? You're a bit away.
I'm a little bit away. Yeah, I'm a 2.5 hour ride from Augusta, down East Maine on the coast.
Yep, nice. Well, I've seen some of your
little town called Winter Harbor.
Winter Harbor, right? Yeah. I was confusing it somehow in my brain with Winterport, but I think that's where Reagan Paul is, right? She's in Winterport, right?
That's right, and you're not the only one. I've heard that a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, thanks for coming on. So before we get into talking about some of the shenanigans that are happening, I mean, I think a lot of people probably know to a degree who you are, because you've been the minority leader for a couple of cycles. But just to kind of talk about who you are, where you come from, and what your I think work background is too, because I think there's some fun stuff there. I think you do some fishing and things like that. And then what brought you into politics, and why do you continue to argue with I feel like being a conservative in Augusta, I've said this before, but I think it's kind of like trying to teach math in an insane asylum.
Well, my story in politics is really my story in life. Was born and raised in Winter Harbor. I've lived here for my whole life, 46 years. My dad was a lobster fisherman. He did many other things, as we all have. We know what it's like to do what it takes to survive down here. So my dad started taking me on the lobster boat when I was 3 years old. I learned how to dig clams, dig worms, did plumbing with my dad, lobstering, collecting junk metal. I mean, you name it. We've done just about everything you can do to earn money. And that's kind of how it is down here in down East Maine, where I live. And my parents both worked full time all the time. My mom worked factory jobs. She worked at the sardine plant over here in Prospect Harbor. She worked at a place called El Scott's, which made parts for light bulbs for a while. And then again at Stinson's, always factory work for my mother. And my dad always did fishing jobs, like I mentioned. So I spent my whole childhood going with my dad. They didn't have the money to leave me at a babysitter. Daycare didn't exist, and if it did, they wouldn't have taken me to one anyway. So I chased my dad around the worm flats and out on the lobster boat and things like that. So by the time I was 10, 12 years old, I had a lot of experience working with my dad. And I remember very vividly, it was the year I was, I believe, 13 and turned 14. I had made a bunch of money lobstering and working that summer, digging worms and lobstering with my dad. And it was the first year I had to pay taxes. And I remember telling the tax accountant, I think you're mistaken, because students don't have to pay taxes. And they said, no, that's Social Security. And I said, what do you mean Social Security? My dad says that's not going to be around when I'm old enough for it. I don't want to do that. And there's no opt out on this stuff. And so at that young age, I had to actually take money that I had earned and send it to the IRS, which really upset me and gave me a really good learning lesson at a young age. And it really shaped my opinion of taxes and the government. And so my dad was a registered Democrat, but he was a very strong believer in civil liberties and blue collar people and things like that. And we both sort of made this shift together as the Democrat Party walked away from civil liberties, walked away from blue collar people. And I sort of transformed unknowingly into a libertarian. And that really led a lot of my political beliefs. And, subsequently, I learned about Ron Paul and got involved. I had two really big impacts in my political, participation, I guess you'd say. The Tea Party movement, and especially in 2010 is when I became really involved, or seeking more involvement in politics. I put up signs for Paul LePage and became involved politically. And I remember how happy I was in 2010 when we actually won that election for governor, the House, and the Senate, and proved that it can be done in Maine.
Yep. Yeah.
And then my involvement increased in 2012 when Ron Paul ran for president, and a lot of people, became involved in the Republican Party at that time, and I was one of them. And so, I would say that my leanings are more sort of based in civil liberties, but I think you've seen the whole Republican Party shift into the party of civil liberties very, very strongly, as a matter of fact. So, I mean, if you had to put I don't know if you could really label me. I think I'm conservative. I think I'm libertarian. I think I'm a lot of things, I guess, but I just follow the Constitution, a strong believer in civil liberties, and my life experience has sort of, led me to that point.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the beauties of the Republican Party of today. You could call it Trump's Republican Party, whatever you want to do. Is that it's really the party of diversity of thought. We had John Eder on here last week. John is a former Green Party, who found his way into the Republican Party because it is the party of freedom of thought, freedom of speech, having an open mind and actually, having differing views, which is actually, is obviously really important. But also, as you said, like a lot of, it's interesting. There's a lot of overlap, I think, between the quote unquote Republican Party, which is this like mass of a bunch of different things at this point. But there's a lot of libertarian leanings, I think, because, the Republican Party is supposed to be based on the constitutional idea of limited government, right? Which is so there's a lot of similarities there. Whereas the Democrat Party seems to be like, how big can we make the government? At what point can the government swallow all of industry and destroy everything? That's a big question. They're trying to do it here in Maine. But yeah, no. So that makes sense. And so, what got you to the point where that's kind of helped shape you? You got involved. When did you first decide to start running? Did you ever run or serve at school board or city council, or did you go straight for the House?
Yeah, sort of what got me involved in local politics was the town was going to build a big fire station. Now, I live in a town that has 500 people, and they were going to build a fire station that was going to cost $2 million. At the time was a lot of money for a town our size. And I didn't really agree with that. So I went to the town meeting, spoke up, I had a lot of numbers based on what the town next to us had spent on a fire department. And at the end of the day, the fire house got built, and it ended up turning into this big, grandiose municipal building, which it looks great. It does a good job. But a lot of people said that I did a great job and I should run for selectman. And so I did that, and I got involved in town politics, and I served as a selectman for 6 years. I served as the chair, had a great time doing it. But what led me to state politics was really the future of the state and the direction the state was going. And I have 3 children, and I want them all to stay here. I want them to have opportunities in the state of Maine. And the shift that this state has taken against a really anti-person agenda, or at least an anti-young person agenda, I don't want to see my state turn into just a vacation land for people from away that have money that want to live on the coast, and turn all the rest of the state into a national park. I don't buy that. I want this to be a prosperous state with a good economy that thrives off of its resources. Our best export from Maine should be lobsters, not our children.
Right.
And I think you're just seeing a massive exodus of all of our promising young people to other states because there's nothing for them here. And we can never have anything for them here with the taxes the way they are, with the energy costs the way they are, unless we change these things. And it's not even in we're not on a level plane here. We're not in a state that has, say, this is where the energy costs are, this is where the taxes are, and it's level. All this stuff is just on a trajectory that is unsustainable. And healthcare, our rural healthcare, I think people don't even understand how bad or how close it is to collapse. And we're not doing anything to fix these problems. The Democrats just keep saying yes to all their special groups. They're running these budgets that are completely out of control. They're not addressing any of the real problems. We're sitting here telling them there's problems. Let's just calm down and fix them. And they're absolutely refuse to do anything that could be seen as agreeing with us or coming to us in any way, even when we're coming to them saying, let us help you save this state from collapse.
Yeah. No, I've been paying a little bit of attention to the budget process, and from what from some of the conversations I've had, I feel like the Republicans to some degree have been a little bit too willing to compromise. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of us conservatives, or us Republicans that are not in the legislature, are like that. If the Democrats had gone along with some of the positions that you guys would have been willing to accept, I think some of us would have been upset with our Republicans, right? So my point here in saying this is not to criticize you, but it's just to say that it's not that the Republicans are not willing to compromise. It's that the Democrats are not. They have power. They know they don't have to, so they choose not to. Even when they could get some concessions and do some things that would actually be helpful and good for our state, better than what they end up passing. It's wild. It's really difficult. So Truth Dare Media had a question about selectmen. So the selectmen are elected in your town, just similar to whether it's city council, town council, select board, those are all kind of the same type of thing that are all elected positions. Sometimes those are elected at like a city council meeting or a town council meeting.
Well, selectmen is a municipal vote. They're usually held at off times of the year. In Winter Harbor, they're in June. Some other towns have them in the winter, like March. They're usually generally, for some reason, not held during the November election, although bigger cities that have city councils seem to have them during that time of year. But it's the smaller towns that have selectmen that seem to have them in, odd times, whenever their annual town meeting is, which is for some places March, for some places June. I know in Winter Harbor it's June. Around here, that's what most of the towns are. Yeah,
I think the majority, there are a few that will do it in March. Most are going to do it in June, or like mine's a bigger. I live in Westbrook, so we're in November, normal general election time, which seems to make the most sense to me because it's when most people would be more likely to show up to vote. But
Chuck, I think just to your previous point of working with them. I think part of that is that it's in our nature to fix things.
Right.
And we're willing to work with other people. And I think, what we've continually shown is that we're the grown-ups in Augusta. We have a willingness to work with you if it means fixing things. I think the people can see very clearly over the last 6 years of Democrats in control that they don't have a willingness to do that, to work with Republicans.
Yeah, or fix things. I mean, again, they seem to be. I don't know. There's this like I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance. I don't know if it's they're like actually trying to destroy our. People will levy the claim that the Democrats are trying to destroy our country, trying to destroy our state. I mean, I would say that probably the vast majority of them are just they ideologically they buy into what the Democrat Party tells them. There may be some that are trying to destroy things that might be part of the plan. I've heard some stories about people basically making that point that we're trying to bring it to the brink of collapse so that we can make an argument for, single payer healthcare or something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, ultimately they're not focused on solutions. They live in fantasy land and and they think that, if we decide that this is what the people need, then we're going to provide it for them, even if we don't have the resources. There's no like a lack of understanding. And to your point earlier, to kind of come back, because part of what I think I really like talking about and haven't done a lot on this podcast is talking about economic impact of policy, right? So you talk about you want Maine to be a place where we have jobs, where people can actually live here, grow up here, have a job, and have a career living in the state of Maine, and we don't get that because we end up exporting our children. And the reason for that, right, is because of like no businesses. So number one, we're a colder state, obviously, and so there's that additional cost that you might not get in some other states of having of the fuel and the energy to be able to keep it warm during winter. So that's a challenge that any business that's going to do business here already has to deal with. On top of that, we have one of the highest costs of living of any state, and our tax situation makes it so that people don't want to invest and come here. So your big businesses or your businesses in general, or even locals, are not starting businesses here that would create those opportunities for our kids because it's too expensive, because the Democrats tax the crap out of everything. Like, it's difficult enough to start a business and take that risk, because that is a risk. You've got to find a way to get out there, get clients, and also be able to pay your people and make a living yourself. That's a huge risk that somebody has to take on to start a business. To, on top of that, have to deal with all the regulations and all of the costs associated with doing business. I mean, and it seems like they're just looking to add on to those costs.
Yeah, so you take advantage of what you do have here, and what we do have here is some of the hardest working people in the country. Some people like my mother that spent 40 years working on a cement floor at factories, that showed up every morning and worked 5 days a week throughout her life. We have those people here, but what we don't have is we don't have low energy costs. We don't have low taxes, and those are things that we can tackle. The taxes that's an easy one. We can start lowering taxes incrementally, decreasing the size of government. Energy costs are high throughout New England, but we're unnecessarily adding onto those costs with things like net energy billing, where when you look at a place like McCrum's potato plant, had an extra $57,000 added onto their bill because of the policies passed in Augusta, and it's written right out as a public policy charge.
57,000 a business. You're saying one business had to pay an extra fee of $57,000 in a year because of net energy billing
in a month on their electric bill.
Holy,
$57,000. Right, and so that's also a tax on the cost of living too. This person says it wasn't per month, but I might have been wrong about that.
No, he was saying wasn't that per month, so I think he's agreeing with you that it was.
I'm pretty sure it was. It was on the bill.
Holy.
So most of the places that have those high energy costs are your freezers, your food, places that have food, freezers, food, grocery stores. So they're getting those elevated costs. As a business, when you have a cost, you have to pass that on to the consumer to keep your business
Right.
because margins are low. So those costs go directly into our grocery bills. And then it ends up, as most taxes do, becoming a tax on the poor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's great. So what I think people have talked about this on the podcast before. I think Sobolewski was on, and we talked about net energy billing. But basically, what is that money going to? Like taking $57,000 a month from a business, and that's going to like for the grants that are subsidizing like solar. Is that
Yeah, there's subsidies for the solar companies. Most of these people are out of state corporations. And so what's happening is these solar plants or solar farms, whatever you want to call them, they're getting over 20 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity that they're producing. Now
okay?
We can buy electricity on the open market for around a nickel a kilowatt, 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So they're overpaying them about 15 cents. Take this for example. They've set up solar fields in Maine that are sending solar energy to Connecticut for 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And the people in Connecticut are complaining about the high cost of it being 10 cents a kilowatt hour. But the ones we've got in Maine under this net energy billing scam, we've started calling it a solar tax because we're trying to put a word out there that people will understand, because this is what this is. It's a solar tax. We're paying over 20 cents a kilowatt hour from those. And every time you see these solar fields go up, it's adding on to that. Now, the public advocate has already figured that as we stand right now, this is adding $200 million to the ratepayers' bills.
Holy crap. Yeah, like so I feel like energy is a place where I think the Democrats have obviously lost their mind. Like I don't know that I necessarily would disagree. I've got to do more research into like quote unquote climate change, but when it comes to, I've generally speaking have been somebody who's been very skeptical of it, and I remain skeptical of it, but I would like to look into it a little bit more. But what I will say is like what's obvious to me is that like the way if it is true, the solutions that the Democrats are pushing are not helpful, right? Like we can't afford that cost. But on top of that, the like solar panels in Maine, when like it's not sunny most of the year, and so like there's not enough energy. If you want to put them in the middle of a desert, right, where they're going to get sun almost all the time, maybe you can make an argument for that, right? I think Elon Musk would make that argument, and I'm not going to argue with Elon Musk on that, but definitely not here in Maine and like cutting down trees or taking like fields that could be used for farming. Food is a big need in our country. More healthy farms would be good. But a farm that I grew up working on, I was back in my hometown. I grew up in Athens, Maine, and a farm that I grew up working in. I was driving through recently, and one of the fields that my old employer used to hay is now filled with solar panels. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? How much energy is that actually generating? And then when you talk about the cost, like even if it's 10 cents, that's twice what we would have to pay otherwise. And like there is a degree where we have to take into account how this impacts people. And again, the Democrats claim to be the party that cares about the poor, and yet, as you say, and you're absolutely right, like these additional taxes are essentially taxes on the poor. These additional costs, like the stuff that they're proposing, I don't think they've passed these ones yet, but like the 70-cent tax on prescriptions, the dollar tax on cigarettes and other things, these are all poor taxes. And it's wild. $200 million in additional cost, probably aside from other money that the government is spending to subsidize these projects, and they're still not producing cost-effective energy. It's absolutely mind-boggling, and it seems anti-science. And
it's way anti-science. And take someone like yourself. You said you're a skeptic of climate change. How are they furthering their position on it when they say that we need to remove carbon because of climate change, so therefore we need to go to carbon-free energies. Well, and we're saying, okay, you don't have to agree with climate change. You can get people on both sides to say, okay, we have a lot of good, clean, renewable, carbon-free energy. Let's use it regardless of whether carbon is good or bad. Solar, uh, solar and wind are junk.
Yeah.
Hydro
Yeah.
Hydro and nuclear are great. You take hydro, for example. It's clean, renewable. It goes on and on forever. It has no carbon impact. And they always say, no, not that, or nuclear is the same thing.
Yeah.
They say no to those, but it's only solar and wind that they're for. I don't see how that helps their argument.
Well, it doesn't make much sense. Like, I think part of their argument around why we don't want hydro is because of the fish, but there are solutions to ensure that the fish can still swim back up and do the things that they need to do at the rivers. There are solutions for that, but I feel like that's part of their argument why they're not doing it, because we have a ton of rivers and in Maine, right? There's tons of places.
The potential of solar, potential of hydro is literally everywhere, and it's not 1800 anymore. It's not, the early 1900s where they put up dams and stopped all the fish passage. We have ways to get the fish up and down the river that work very well, so that's not a problem anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So they're only. I can't even understand why they would be against it. I also don't understand why they're against nuclear, especially since nuclear seems to be the most efficient way to generate a lot of energy. It's the most cost-effective and efficient, clean form of energy that I think we have, especially with the what do they call the micro nuclear, I think is what they're calling it. Like, which somebody was suggesting that maybe with 6 of those, we could power the entire state of Maine. And yeah, it just seems like if you really care about the environment and you really want to produce energy, well, there's 2 things that I would say, actually. If you care about the environment and you're concerned about carbon output, I would suggest that you start using less energy, would be one of the things that I would suggest to these people. But for some reason, that's never part of their solution. They also don't tend to take less flights, which is interesting, on their private jets, the people who are pushing this from afar. These are some of the big critiques. But anyway, it's like, it's clear to me that this is just more of a money grab by these major organizations, like the people who are installing and making money off of wind and solar, not actually something that's good for the environment.
Absolutely, yeah, that's what I mean. And as a country, we build nuclear reactors all the time. Our whole entire United States Navy is, all these nuclear subs, aircraft carriers, they're running on these reactors. We could use them to power our cities just the same way.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting too, again, it partly blows my mind because, like, Google is also they're a very liberal organization, right? Like, all your major tech companies, for the most part, are very liberal. They're all about climate change and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that they announced, as because they're putting in all this stuff to do AI, is they announced that they were going to build like somewhere around 6, I think it was 6, nuclear power plants on the West Coast, I think, primarily, to kind of help handle the power. So it's clear that, like, this is a solution that even many people on the left are for. But here in the state of Maine, there seems to be zero appetite by the Democrats. It's just like, no, we have to do more subsidies for wind, and especially the horrible offshore wind, which I'm sure we could get into ideas. But wind is, I mean, solar's bad, wind is terrible. Like, am I wrong?
You're not wrong. I mean, there's just, as far as I'm concerned, there's absolutely no honesty and integrity on the side that is pushing these solar panels. We live in a state that a quarter of the year has 6 hours of sunlight at best. And during that time of year, these things are covered in snow. They're getting absolutely no energy whatsoever. It's just such a joke to drive around and see these things showing up all over the place, paying the amount of money we're paying for them. If there was a place for them, it's going to be somewhere that's not Maine. It's going to be somewhere that has a little bit of actual, sunlight. So maybe move them down south. Let's stick to what we've got. I see the potential of hydro everywhere. These small nuclear reactors. Let's try one. We had Maine Yankee power in the state for years, and we never, we didn't have any problem with nuclear. Nuclear is very safe. You can ask people that have served in the Navy on nuclear subs and aircraft carriers. These things are very safe. They run on a little tiny amount of fuel, and they go out to sea, and those ships could stay gone for 20 years. And, you can take 30 years worth of nuclear waste and fit it in the back of a pickup truck. So it's not as bad as everybody's been scared into. And if carbon is such a problem, when you talk about scaring, they've scared the young people into thinking that carbon is going to kill the planet and climate change is going to end us with it. They keep coming up with these new clocks, right? But it's always 10 years from now, we're going to pass the point of no return. And then another 10 years, and then another 10 years, they keep doing this. Well, if it's that bad, then why aren't they facing the reality that you're not going to get any of these goals that they keep talking about with solar panels and windmills? So, I mean, it just shows me that they're not really serious about what they're doing. They're just peddling lies. And it's so people can get rich off of solar panels and windmills.
Yeah. Yeah, it's mind blowing, and so many people have just bought into it. That's the frustrating thing. So many people actually believe that this is the solution. This is our only hope to save humanity, to save society, to save the planet, is to adopt wind and solar, which are just like. So again, the party that claims to be to own science ends up being very anti-science in all reality, and it's just like, this is like, because I'm all for trying to protect and preserve the environment, regardless of whether or not I believe in climate change and the carbon emissions concerns. I'm all for like taking care of and being a good steward. I'm a Christian. I believe God gave us this planet to be stewards over, and we need to be good stewards of it. And so, yeah, you don't have to argue
Amen.
with me any crazy thing. Just say we need to be good stewards. How can we most effectively do that without killing our population, right? Because we also do have to consider the poor. And making sure that everybody has opportunities to be able to grow and thrive in our society. So that's another thing that we need to be good stewards of, right? Not just the environment. We have to look at everything. So if you want to look at what's best for the environment, let's go for it. I'm all for it. But we need to do it in a way that makes sense, not that just makes a certain segment of the population rich. So I know we're coming up against a time where you got to get off to your next thing, but for the Maine X community, they love to we broadcast on X, and that's where the majority of people listen, outside of the ones that follow my Substack. Anything that you'd like to share with them about like what's going on and what it's like and how it feels to serve and be in the minority for such a long period of time, and how people can help?
It's been rough, but I've spent, like I said, I've been spending the last 10, 12 years of my life working towards this goal of getting Republicans in the majority, turning this state red. We came within 50 votes of winning the majority in the House last session, which was a personal, goal of mine. And I think we're right there. Just keep pushing. I want people to keep spreading the word about these budget fights that we're having and everything. I feel like our message is finally getting out there. Thanks, to you, Chuck, for being a part of that, putting that word out there. But I think the people of Maine are really waking up to our message. I think we're keeping it simple. We're there for the working people. We're there for families. We're the blue collar people. We're the blue collar party now. We're the civil liberties party now. We're so many of these things that people that are willing to, objectively look at the two parties and what they're pushing and see what's happening in Augusta, they got to be looking at us Republicans now and saying, boy, those are the people that seem to have a little bit more level head. They seem to be the ones that are being the grown-ups in these, budget fights and making sure that girls' sports are fair for our girls. And, just so many different issues. I feel like we're winning on all the issues. And if people just keep sharing that with their friends, just like, for example, the fraud, waste, and abuse that we're exposing in Augusta, and the never ending spending that the Democrats just keep saying yes to. They just keep hitting the button, green, green, green. Yes, spend, spend, spend. And all we're saying is, let's be accountable. Let's take a look at this. When we've got a program integrity audit that shows that somebody billed Maine Care $3 million, and $2.4 million of it was fraudulent charges, 80% fraudulent. And we're saying, hold on a minute, let's take a look. What are we going to do? Are we going to at least make them stop billing? Are we going to get repayment for them? What are we going to do here?
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like they're willing to do anything. They just turn a blind eye to it and let it go. And I think our message is getting out there, and the people of Maine are seeing it. So just keep spreading those messages. And the only thing that is going to change it is that if Republicans take over this state, we need to take over some of these branches of government. I think we're about ready to take over the legislature. Hopefully we can find a good candidate to win the governor too, and turn this state completely red. I think we're just about there, and a little bit more, and we'll be there.
Yeah, and I know you got to get going, but like real quick, I agree. We're very close. One of the things that you've mentioned in the Republican Party becoming the party of the working class is that means that we're the ones that it's more difficult to get out to vote. We have the most. This is evidence of why I think we lost the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, is because now the low propensity voters, which are more of your working class, blue collar people, aren't getting out to vote. So one thing is, you got to get people out to vote. We got to do better at like doing the absentee mail-in ballots and stuff like that, and chasing that in order to be able to get people elected. But we're really close. Thank you so much for joining us, Billy Bob. I'm going to close out the show, but I'll let you hop off because I know you got to get going. So thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today, and just for what you're doing in Augusta.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. We'll see you.
All right. Have a great day. But yeah, everybody at home, in order to help in the effort to get more people to take over the state, we got to turn the state red. We need the governor, we need the Senate, we need the House in order to be able to pass policies that make sense here in the state of Maine. And we need your help. In order to do that, we got to get people out to vote. And so see how you can get involved. Again, as Billy Bob was saying, one of the things that we can do, the Maine Wire has been doing a great job sharing information, but one of the things we can do is help by sharing that information with other people. We need to be people who are building relationships with people in our communities and sharing this information, because it's not coming through the mainstream media. We're trying to create it here. The Maine Wire is creating it. Unquirer on X is also creating it. But we need people to share that information, because without that information getting shared, people are not going to see it. The majority of your Maine, there's so many people, especially if you're on X, that are not on X. So we got to use the other platforms. We got to go where people are. We got to share information. We got to build relationships. That's what we have to do, because we have as Billy Bob was saying, we are winning on the issues. So but anyway, thank you everybody for watching. Tomorrow we have with us Nick Murray, who's formerly of Maine Policy Institute, and we're going to be talking economics, Doge, a whole bunch of other fun things. Tariffs, I think we're going to be talking some more of a national politics, but all those things do happen, impact the state of Maine. So we're probably going to be talking about how that factors into what's going on here in the state of Maine. So we'll be back with you tomorrow. In the meantime, we have created some merchandise. And if you're interested in supporting the podcast in any way, the best way to do that is to check out our merch. I've put some links on my X page. Actually, if you look at it under my link, my website that's listed on my X page, is to a place where you can purchase sweatshirts, hats, and a bunch of other things, stickers, even like nice little stickers you can put on the back of your phone. And again, the idea behind this, I'm not making any money. I 10% maybe is what the markup is, and that's not even going to cover the cost that I put into running this podcast. But it's really about getting the conversation going. Wearing the hat, sweatshirts, having the sticker on the back of your phone or whatever is just a way for people to see and hear about the podcast, so you can talk about what's going on and people can hear what's going on in our state and hear from people like Billy Bob and other people that we've had on in the past. So thank you all, and we'll be back with you again tomorrow. Have a great day.